seems that this audit process that a lot of companies are going through now, and I think whether you're a large company or a smaller one, it seems very manual. I've got a lot of people that I'm throwing at it, trying to understand what the regulations are. I've got a lot of people, or maybe I'm hiring some college interns to go and collect the data. I've got numerous Excel sheets everywhere. You know, how do I go about getting some of this manual approach out? Are there ways that I can, you know, automate this, that I think you used the term, if I can assess once and comply with many?
Good summation, yeah. You know, just like we saw the rise of industrial automation in manufacturing in the 60s and 70s gain huge benefits not only in production volume output, which I think is what you're kind of alluding to, but also in quality control. If you're doing things on a largely manual or an ad hoc basis, you're going to have losses in translation between specific individuals as job duties change throughout the audit cycle. You're also going to have more errors because, again, you know, human nature is we occasionally make mistakes. Right. And if you can programmatically handle this, either on the data collection side or on the analytical side, then you reduce not only your propensity for errors, but you also speed up your cycle. So now instead of looking at the audit coming through on an annual basis with quarterly, shall we say, revisions or reassessment cycles, you might be able to squeeze that back to a monthly, or in some cases, if you have strong automation capabilities, maybe on a weekly scale. And this keeps it from being more of a cyclical project, and instead allows you to kind of push that operational fixing, shall we say, into your operation, your day-to-day IT activities, which again is going to drive, I think, a lot of cost out of the problem.
Yeah, I think that's so important because you can also anticipate issues and prior to an auditor coming in, if you can get those issues addressed, get problems fixed and so on, then once the auditor comes in, it's more of a matter of proving compliance, demonstrating compliance, providing the documentation to those auditors, and not having them say, well, you're out of compliance here and here. If you can anticipate that beforehand and get those issues resolved, how much better off are you going to be, you know, going into that audit? And additionally, you know, there's been some studies that have been done, and still over 50% of companies are using manual audit approaches. Wow. They're still using Excel spreadsheets and so on. So there's a lot of companies out there that can benefit from automating this entire process around compliance.
I think there's an important point to add there, though, and just like any other business process, if you automate a broken process, you're just going to fail faster and more frequently.
Garbage in, garbage out, only
Absolutely.
Gets more efficient. Right?
Exactly, great point. So I think that if you were to actually step back from your audit activities and say, you know, security, for example, is often a data broker back to the audit cycle. They're the ones that are responsible for kind of, to some degree, IT oversight. And if they take a long, hard look at how they're providing and how they're gathering that data and fix those portions of their processes before they look to automate, then I think they're going to be far more successful when the time for automation comes.
So that's an interesting point. Let me ask you guys this question. If I'm compliant, does that mean that I'm secure?
Absolutely not.
No. Obviously, there's been a lot of data breaches, companies that have had data breaches that have been, you know, in compliance, even PCI compliance. There are standards set around that, and companies need to strive to be compliant around these regulations. However, smart security professionals will look at a higher standard to you know, have their security bar set even higher. And if you've got better security, you're going to meet those compliance initiatives. So it's better to have an overall security framework and meet those compliance initiatives rather than just looking at becoming compliant, because that's sort of the minimum bar.
So if I focus my efforts on becoming more secure by default, I'm going to be more compliant. So I don't have to look at two in terms of silos.
Well, if you look at the audit cycle itself, it's really a snapshot in time. How was I when I was last checked? And coming back to my previous point, if I can programmatically or automatically or through automation gather data and respond to it on an ongoing cycle with a higher, shall we say, clock speed, then that means that I'm always reassessing and I'm always remediating and I'm always on top of my game. Whereas if I wait for that quarterly or that annual cycle, I have an opportunity for my organization, my processes to drift away from what is a known good state. So if you're talking about anything from configuration management to patching to, you know, anything along those kind of cyclical lines, the tighter I can get those cycles down, the better off I'm going to be overall.
All right. So I think in closing out on the topic of the audit tax and how to reduce that, any last bit of advice you would offer companies?
Go ahead.
I think that it comes down to a couple of key steps. One is take a long, hard look at the service, shall we say, that you provide back to the audit cycle as a practitioner, be it on the security side or on the audit side. Look at how you provide those functions and what data sets you're providing back into that cycle. And then streamline those, and then look at the automation side. And then, again, as I said a moment ago, tighten up those cycles, because that's where you're actually going to start to drive the cost out.